we have some big Patriots news. If anyone missed it, if you were living under a rock or, away early for the weekend, it's official. DeAndre Hopkins is visiting with the Patriots next week, part of his free agency tour here. So, Alex, what's your pitch? How do you start when he comes in next week?
I am a big fat contract. I put it on the table. No, I don't even want to say the good and the bad of the visit. I want to say this is great, but. And here's why. They got to visit with him. That's big. That means he's at least willing to meet with them, which means there's a chance he'll sign with them. It means that, yes, he probably is, at least to a necessary extent, over the Bill O'Brien stuff. We know all of that. What their strategy needs to be, and I'm not the first one who said this, do not let him leave the building without a contract. And if that means you have to overpay a little bit, you have to overpay a little bit. You're not really spending any big money for the rest of the season. You're going to be able to probably trade or release Devontae Parker. So that opens up just over $6 million in salary cap space. If you have to overpay, you have to overpay a little bit. I'll get into the contract in a second. So that's all well and good. You're going to get him in the building. Only you can talk to him, and you can basically go meet his price and make sure he doesn't leave and visit anywhere else. The one problem is, and we might be on the same page here.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
The Tennessee Titans are going to have a chance to do that before the Patriots do. The report was originally Sunday. Mike Vrabel said late this week, early next week, so we don't know. But the Rappaport report this morning said whenever the timeline is, and we don't know the date of the Patriots meeting either other than next week, the Titans meeting will happen first. So the Titans can do that before the Patriots can. Here's where I'm at with the Titans. First of all, the Patriots have more than double the cap space they do, according to overthecap.com. So if Hopkins wants money, you're not getting this done for cheap. Maybe the Titans, maybe they can meet Hopkins' number to the point where he says, I'll get back to you. Are they going to be able to meet the number where he's not going to take any other visits? The other thing is, I still don't really understand why the Titans want DeAndre Hopkins. They should be trying to lose games. They're in a rebuild, and maybe Mike Vrabel doesn't subscribe to that school of thought, and I actually don't expect him to. But how aggressive are they really going to be? Whereas the Patriots desperately need this guy. So, and the other thing is the Patriots, if they're going about this the right way, can get, obviously they've talked to his team if they're setting up a visit. Maybe there's already a starting number in place that they can essentially poison pill the Titans. And, I think the Titans, according to Over the Cap, have $8.2 million. Patriots could funky with it and say, whatever the contract is we're offering, $10 million cap hit the first year. That's what that's going to have. Match that, Titans. And the Titans can't, because they've done all the maneuvering to their roster they're going to do. They did that all back right before free agency. They can't open up that much more space. The contract, why don't you talk about the visit? Sorry, I'm taking over. You talk about the visit, and then I'll give what I think the contract should be.
I agree with a lot of that, right? It's kind of like in a way, a restricted free agent contract, right? Where you can finagle it so a team like Tennessee literally can't offer what you're offering. And Tennessee seems like a weird fit. Mike Vrabel does seem like that type of guy who never is going to throw in the towel and say we're rebuilding, but always want to go for it. But the three things DeAndre Hopkins said in the I Am Athlete podcast, which, what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. So most importantly, that was more recently than he gave that list of quarterbacks that he wants to play for. And it was more recently than the thing about, Mahomes or whatever it was.
The face video where he's smiling.
The face video, that's what it was. Yes, it's more recently than the face video. So people say, oh, he made a face at the Patriots. Oh, well, Mac Jones wasn't on his list. What did he say the most recently? And it's
three things were great management, a QB who loves the game, and a great defense. And if you want to kind of break those down, Patriots from management perspective, from the top to bottom, right? Robert Kraft's as solid as they come. Bill Belichick, if you want to say maybe he's retiring in the short term, right? Kind of year to year, but still, he kind of seems like he's on that same window almost as DeAndre Hopkins is. So the management to me would be a check.
Yeah, it's going to come down to perspective. And
Mhm.
if you dig further into that quote, and I retweeted this morning, you can check it out on my timeline at Real Alex Barth on Twitter. He talks about having 4 GMs in 4 years, and he said he's had to deal with that. He doesn't want to deal with that. So the question becomes, when he says stability, even if Bill retires, it seems like the Patriots have a plan in place. There's not going to be like this massive
Yeah.
organizational overhaul because the GMs he's had have all gotten fired and leave on their own accord. So, or maybe he says to Bill, "Hey, look, I'm not signing here to play for Gerard Mayo. I'm not signing here to play for Steve. I'm signing here to play for you. Can you tell me you're going to be here through the duration of the contract?" So now he said he trusts Belichick. Like he said he loves Belichick. We saw it in that video, right? The mic'd up. This to me is the most hairy one of his 3 checkpoints.
Yeah.
But if it's the Patriots are stable, the way he describes it brings it into question. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft's not going anywhere. Robert Kraft isn't changing course of the organization in the next 2 or 3 years. Frankly, if he does, Hopkins is going to, it means Hopkins is cooked. If they're bad enough that Kraft has to go in a completely different direction, Hopkins is cooked anyway. He's probably going to retire because they're not going to be that bad if they land DeAndre Hopkins. So it basically comes down to he might not have the same GM the whole time, but does he trust that? Does he trust whatever the plan is, right? We know there's some sort of
Yeah.
plan. Gerard Mayo didn't come back here for nothing.
Yeah.
Do they let him in on whatever that plan is behind the scenes, and does he trust it? I think they would, and
Mhm.
that he would.
CLNS Media's Patriots coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.
And that's why, to me, it's still a check.
Yeah.
And then, so the next quarterback who loves the game, he said, "I don't need a great QB. I've done it with subpar quarterbacks. Just a quarterback who loves the game like I do." And say what you want about Mac Jones' play on the field, but it's pretty clear Mac Jones loves football, whether it's, all of his teammates talking about his work ethic, his leadership, just watching him today, 20 minutes after practice, throwing in the pouring rain. It's clear he loves football. It kind of brought me back to what, now I forget if Juju said it about Mac or Mac said it about Juju.
Mac said it about Juju. Did you listen to Catch 22 today?
I did not.
Okay, because you're
Like
going
the thought
verbatim the
process?
conversation me and Evan had.
Um,
Stole my take.
Well, Max said football nerd, right? They're all football
Yeah.
nerds. So quarterback who loves the game, Mac, I think, is an easy check there.
I mean, I think it's hard not to hear Hopkins say that. And that was the first thing that came to my mind, too, when
Yeah.
he says, "I want a quarterback that loves the game and pushes everybody to be better." That's Mac Jones. I also, it's hard. And I talked about this. Remember when Mac made that comment at the beginning of camp? He said it's normal and it's hard not to be
Mhm.
comparative.
Yep.
Well, Hopkins is already being comparative in these answers because he mentions that, he wants stability because he's had a different GM every 4 years. All right. So where's the comparative of this one? Well, Kyler, we know his whole thing, right? He couldn't stop playing Call of Duty long enough to watch game tape. That does not seem like Mac Jones at all. You
No.
remember a couple of years ago, I don't think you were on the beat yet. I think it was his rookie year. We asked Mac Jones what he was going to do for his bye week. No, it's Thanksgiving. What he's going to do for Thanksgiving. He said, "Well, I'll have the meal and then, watch film. There's a game." And we were like, "But are you going to go play catch in the backyard? Are you going to watch the games that are on that day?" "No, I'm just going to watch film. That's what I like to do with my time off." Like, I think that's what, show Hopkins that clip. That should be a part of the pitch. Show him that clip because that checks that box emphatically.
It's like him having his girlfriend walk routes for him in the backyard.
Yes, that was another one. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last part of that, 3-item checklist was a great defense, which is, if it's not Mac loving the game is the easiest check, a great defense. The Patriots should have a very good defense this year.
And then he says within that he wants a strong defensive line, which I personally just found very interesting because was a wide receiver
like from playing with JJ Watt or
well,
watching
just in
Kyler
general,
Murray
like,
run around?
what does a wide receiver care about the defensive line? Like, it's one thing he says, like, with a great secondary, it's like, okay, he knows he's wide receiver. He's facing these guys. He knows what a great secondary can do. But, it's almost like he's looking at two teams and the money's the same and all things are the same. But, team A is great pass rush. Team B is great corners. But I want to go to like, it's weird to hear a player talk philosophical football like that. It'd be Matthew Judon talking about what he looks for in an ideal wide receiver. So I don't know that it means anything. The Patriots have a great defensive line. They have a great defense. But it was just interesting to hear him get into that kind of depth about it for me personally.
Yeah, I didn't see the defensive line part, but that is an interesting kind of
He
dynamic.
kind of threw it in at the
on
end.
that.
Maybe I'm looking at it too much, but I thought it was interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. So what do you kind of I see some contract projections in the chat. I'm right like 2 years, maybe if you have to do the 3rd year, but most of the guaranteed money falls in the first 2 years. That's kind of where I'm at. Where are you thinking for where are you at for contract projections?
So this is, I wouldn't necessarily start with this, but I think if you get to the point where it's the deal to get him and not have him leave the building and all that, 3 years, 40 million, all of the guaranteed money's in the first 2 years. So this is what, right? It gets reported as 3 years, 40 million.
Big number.
Right. And that's what then his agent can go and be like, we got this guy who's 31. People heard he's washed, a 3-year deal. And then in reality, you're looking at like 2 years, 28 million, where 20 of that, 18 to 20 of that is guaranteed in the first year. And you finagle that, or you finagle the cap around it. You work the signing bonus into that. That's what I would do. That's what I think that the 3 years you're going to catch his attention with that. 40 million makes it sound like it's in the neighborhood of the Beckham contract. In reality, it's like 2 for 14 a year, which I think is a very, very reasonable contract. And then look, if he's great, you have him for that 3rd year at value. And if not, they're basically, because I already see it in the chat, when I say 3 over 40, a 2-year deal with essentially a team option for the 3rd year. It's not technically a team option, but it functions like a team option. You don't have to do void years, which is big, and they don't want to do void years. They've pretty much stopped doing that. That's
It's really been McCourty, right? They kind of stopped with McCourty.
McCourty was the last. Well, I guess it's technically still is on the books. McCourty's the last deal on the books they have for the 4 years. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily start there. I might start at like, 225, 230, but I think 3 years, 40 million with a team out after 2 years, 28 million guaranteed. I think that stops him from going to meet with other teams. The Patriots can afford it. And it's not like a massively expensive contract for a guy that, if he puts up numbers like he put up last year at $18 million a year or $14 million a year, sorry, is the number I had, $14 million a year, that contract's going to be a steal. What'd they give Aguilar? They gave Aguilar like, was it 12 and a half?
The big number was like 24 over 2.
What did his AAV end up being?
I think it was 12.
Hang on, I'm going to find it. If you can give Nelson Aguilar 12 in 2021, so coming out of the COVID cap, so his deal straight up, like the reported, was 13 a year.
Okay.
If you can give Nelson Aguilar 13 a year, you can give Hopkins 14 a year. I don't think that's unrealistic.
And they have right now projected a lot of cap room next year and, down the line, because they don't have a lot of these guys signed long term. They're draft picks recently.
Yeah.
So they have the cap space. They do kind of have to get in that, you don't want to be bidding against yourself, but you want to be a good offer where, as you said, you don't want to let them leave the building, right? So you kind of have to balance that. But yeah, I think that he's probably going to want that 3rd year. So I think that would be enticing. So something right around there, I think, would work.
That's where I'm at with it.
And then if you get him here, you're going to be able to free up some cap because you're going to have a lot of receivers. Someone's going to have to go. Parker and Bourne are the popular names. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, if you sign Hopkins, just get one of them out immediately, draft capital. I'm not really like, I'd keep them as long as possible throughout training camp because, look, Hopkins has had injury issues. He's 31. Parker has had injury issues. Tyquan Thornton in his 1 year has had injury issues. These things happen. I mean, we don't know where Juju and Thornton are right now. They're not even on the field. So I'm more keep these guys as long as possible. Then maybe at cut down day, maybe another team loses a receiver, you can trade one of these guys. I'd probably pick Parker. It's a little more money. The position, the X receiver is a little redundant. That'd be where I'm at, but I'm not pushing one of these guys out the door right away if you do sign Hopkins.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's no rush to move on from either of them. You never know what's going to happen. And maybe you figure out a way to keep all of them, but they're probably going to want to open up cap on the other side of it. In Devontae Parker, you open up $6.2 million. There's no dead cap on that. That all comes right off the books. I don't see how he's going to play enough with Hopkins on the team to justify that contract. Frankly, he might ask out. He's a veteran in a contract year. He wants to be on the field. He wants to be able to earn his money. And do you want that in the locker room? The Patriots, like, it would make all the sense in the world to move on from Devontae Parker. I know some people have said Kendrick Bourne, and the team doesn't love him. But if it was to the point where they didn't want him on the team anymore, there were so many chances for them to move on from him last summer, this spring. Like, it would have been done by now. So I think Parker is the pretty obvious odd man out when you talk about if they're able to get Hopkins. But again, I still wouldn't do it until the end of camp, just in case.
Yeah.
And by the way, you've got a young corner you just invented. Like, this is not the main reason to do it, but it's something to consider. You've got a young corner you just invested a lot in. The more good wide receivers you can throw at him in training camp to get him ready, the better. So again, just another reason to keep Parker until you absolutely have to cut him.
Yeah. And we've talked about the football fit a lot, right? He's going to come in here. He's going to be your number one guy. As we've been saying for what feels like years now, they have a bunch of quality 2s and 3s, but everyone's just a little, high up on the pecking order than they should be. This drops people down in order. So I think it's just, now that they get him in here, I think you just have to do it. It's a perfect fit. He fits with your pieces. He's obviously had success with Bill O'Brien. I think it just makes all the sense in the world from football fit and everything else.
Yeah, I said there is risk with Hopkins. He struggled to stay on the field with injuries. He has the PED suspension. He is 31. Like, I get that. I'm not sitting here saying they signed DeAndre Hopkins and they win 3 Super Bowls in a row, but they've needed a coverage dictating wide receiver for years now, basically since Rob Gronkowski retired. Because as great as Julian Edelman was, slot receivers don't dictate coverage. They just don't, not in that way. They've needed this kind of player for years. It is a make or break year for the franchise at the quarterback position, so you might as well give him the best chance possible to succeed. It is not often guys of this caliber become available. Forget, you don't have to give up anything draft-wise. I totally understand there's risks. Totally understand it. That's life. Very few decisions come without risk. When you weigh the positives and the negatives, you don't have to necessarily love everything about Hopkins, but you can't sit here and tell me the negatives outweigh the positives with this one. The upside they have, what are they really risking? If it doesn't work this year offensively, they have to hit the reset button anyway. So unless you think Hopkins somehow makes the offense worse, like the offense would be better off without Hopkins than with him, which I don't see the argument there. Maybe he's not great. Maybe he's not worth the contract, but I don't see how that makes the offense worse, right? Unless you truly believe he makes the offense worse, which again, please show me your work. They have the money. They don't have to give up any draft capital. It's a boom or bust year anyway. Where is the kill shot negative in all of this? Where is the be all end all? They shouldn't do this, because I just can't find it. And I'm usually somebody who's found it. I was sitting here last year saying, no, they don't need to go after Odell Beckham. They're not at that point in their roster building. It doesn't make sense. 2 years ago, I was saying it with whoever the hell the wide receiver. It might have been Beckham again. I don't remember. It wasn't AJ Brown. I was in on AJ Brown, but like
always Odell.
The equivalent, like 30-year-old injured former superstar receiver. Like, I've been a no on that guy going back since
Oh,
like the first time Odell Beckham was available.
Was it Julio Jones 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was out on Julio Jones. I was out on Odell Beckham. So this is not the guy. This is not the weapons guy. The guy's always about talking about weapons, just sitting here talking about a guy that was really good in Madden a couple years ago. Because I think that's what you get a lot in this conversation. I did a show the other day on Bleacher Report where this guy kept asking about Jarvis Landry. No, Jarvis Landry doesn't make the Patriots better. He doesn't help them. He'd be a waste of money. The risk totally outweighs the reward in pursuing him. No, I'm not the guy that, because I think people hear people pushing for Hopkins and they assume it's that guy talking to them. I could not be further from that guy. And by the way, I was out on Beckham earlier this offseason. I didn't want Beckham. Frankly, Hopkins should get more money than Beckham did. He won't, because Beckham signed first and signed for too much, but Hopkins is a better option than Beckham was. They need to do this. They need to find a way to make this work. Whenever he's here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever he's here next week, do not let him out of the building without a contract. Give him, the ground round doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, where they took Rodney Harrison to sign him. And I'm realizing we forgot to give that backstory on Catch 22 today. But take him to the ground round equivalent, whatever it is. Take him to a good food store. Take him to Davio's. I know he likes Italian food. Take him to the North End, wherever it's got to be. Get him a nice meal. Give him a fat contract and say, what do we have to do so your next flight is home to pack to move up here? And it's not to Houston, and it's not to Cleveland, and it's not to Kansas City, it's not to Buffalo. Your next flight is going to be home to pack to fly right back here to get on the field for training camp. That is what they need to do.
Are we going to get a DeAndre Hopkins at Logan Airport picture? A new one? You know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's about that time. It's about that time for it.
And I mean, Julio Jones, the last old receiver who went to Tennessee, didn't work out great. So just remember that. Yeah. I know DeAndre Hopkins is listening, but one other thought I had on this was, I wonder what Robert Kraft is looking at this and thinking, because your team, you got a pulled primetime game last year. The ticket prices were down. If he's looking at this move, this is a guy who brings some juice back to the fan base, right? Brings
Moves
some
the
energy.
needle.
You got one of these guys that looks like in Christian Gonzalez, who the fan base is really happy about. But now, like, this is DeAndre Hopkins. This is going to put butts in seats. It's going to sell jerseys. This is the guy that I think Kraft might be kind of pushing for behind the scenes here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I thought it was really interesting that the team doesn't always, let me phrase this right. The Patriots media team, right? It was tweeted by the team, that report today, right? And I don't want to say they don't always do it, because they don't always meet with high value players, but like that, it would be hard for them not to notice the buzz that the team account tweeting out that Hopkins is reportedly visiting. It'd be hard for them not to notice the buzz that created.
Yep.
And I think that's important, because you hit on something there. They did have that primetime game moved last year. They're widely projected as fourth in the division. They need somebody to move the needle. And if nothing else, DeAndre Hopkins will move the needle if they sign him. For, maybe if he's bad, it wears off in November and December, but even if he's not great early on, that moves the needle. Did they make a mistake? Blah, 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 whatever. There's going to be a ton of people taking victory laps on me. But yeah, he absolutely moves the needle.